Hello, welcome to the show. So we're going to start off today having a look at .NET 6 and ASP.NET Core. They've been released. Woohoo! So we'll have a look at those and figure out some of the things that haven't really been explained well, or some bugs that I found, and also some features that people haven't been talking about. So the first one we can kick off with today is something I spotted about C#. So there's a bit of code that I've got here. Let's just paste that in. I'll put it in a function so we can have a look. So the first is a lambda expression, and I didn't realize, but C#10 added the ability to set the return type for the lambda expression. So in the past, you would have received an error here because the return type can be a string or a number here in this case. And normally you'd have to kind of manually cast to an object in both of these if-else statements over here. And that would solve that issue. But it turns out you can just set the return type now and it does the right thing. So that's a very secret feature that I haven't seen publicized until the latest RTM blog post for .NET 6. So that's the first thing that I spotted. Another thing, another bug I found with this JSON serializer context. I did a show on the JSON serializer stuff, system.text.json source generators, and actually the beginning of the next show covers it a little bit as well. And I discovered a bug with it. So the idea behind this, just really quickly as a recap, is to speed up the performance of serializing and deserializing these types specified by type of here. And it does that by generating a bunch of source code in this class for serializing and deserializing them. And then to hook it up in ASP.NET Core, you have to add JSON options on your MVC builder and call add context and pass in your JSON serializer context. Now, you can only have one of these contexts added in your ASP.NET Core app. Initially, I tried creating one per type here, but that doesn't work. And I found another bug today, so I've raised a GitHub issue, but I'll show you really quickly what the bug is. So the first thing is this thing still builds in Visual Studio, but on the command line, if I build it, I get a bunch of so here I get ignore these warnings, but I get no errors and no warnings pertaining to this class. But on the command line, I'm getting loads of warnings. CS1591, missing XML comment for publicly visible type or member. So it's saying that I need to generate, I need to add comments to the generated source code that gets added inside this partial class. And the reason it's doing that is because somewhere in here, in my project, is it here or is it further up? Oops, I think it might be further up. Let's just open the folder. Somewhere I wrote a thing telling it to add XML. There we go. Generate documentation file true. So this generates the XML documentation file. So it basically takes the summary comments and spits them out as an XML file alongside the executable or DLL file that is this project. And that enables CS1591, which is that error. And it's only showing up on the command line and not in Visual Studio, because in Visual Studio I have an editor config file. Whoops. Let's open that as text. I have an editor config file over here, and I've disabled CS1591 because I don't want to have to comment every single class and member. The only reason I enabled that feature is so that I could comment my controller action methods and view models and get some nice Swagger comments. So if I start this up, this application, it will read these comments. It will read these comments, and once it starts up, it will fire up Swagger, the Swagger UI, and display them there so that people can see quite clearly and get some nice documentation for there. Here we go, creates a new car. Here we have the car was created, the car is invalid, the MIME type, blah, blah, blah. And you have lots of nice examples and things here as well. So that XML comment is quite important, but it enables that warning CS1591. So I disabled it using an editor config file, but it doesn't work in generated code, unfortunately. So I raised a bug in the .NET Core repo. So this doesn't work. Another thing I tried was wrapping the code with pragma warning disable, but that doesn't work because it's a partial class, so the code doesn't actually get generated in this file. It gets generated in a separate file where the rest of this partial class is outlined, and that's where this pragma really needs to go. Since that's generated code though, I have no control over that. One other workaround that does work is to set no warn in your CSproj file, but then that will turn off the warning completely, and I still want that warning for my controller. So that's another way to do it. That will turn it off globally. One other suggestion that somebody made was we can set the class to be internal instead of public. So I was just going to give that a go. I haven't had a chance to do that yet. So if I set that internal, save that, and rebuild this project, we should no longer get these warnings anymore. And we got a lot less warnings, and then these ones can be ignored because this is a project template. So I have a bunch of warnings that when you instantiate the template, these warnings go away. So that is one solution. Although I seem to be getting other warnings here. So let's have a look. Does not implement inherited abstract member. Is complaining. But I think a build will just fix that. I've seen Visual Studio complain sometimes about using source generated code. See, that warning just went away. It's a bit, yeah, it's a bit flaky. So that succeeded, but the warning has come back. The error has come back. So I think this is just one of those ones that you can just ignore. I didn't get any errors on the command line either. So yeah, internal works. I think that's probably the best solution right now. I should probably test it to make sure it still works if I set this to internal. Let's really quickly fire this up, and we'll call the get. We'll try that out and execute, and we get our data back. So that still works. So that's, I'm just going to commit that. Add custom JSON serializer context. So that will complain. I have complained about this on to the people responsible on Twitter, and hopefully they will fix this. We could also actually report a problem, and that will, somebody will read that, and that will go down and get filtered down to the right person at Microsoft to look into that. So that's another thing. Another thing I found is not new to .NET 6, but I think it's new, it was new to me and probably will be new to a fair number of people. It's if we go down to, well, if I fire up the application again, and if I navigate to a URL that does not exist, so bring up the F12 developer tools and just go to blah, blah, blah. The response I'll get back from the network is failed error response code because the server just didn't respond with anything. Now we could actually respond with something. There's a new function that was added called .fallback something. Use fallback, I think it was. What was it called? That's returning an application builder. Oh, was it on the? Was it on over here? On the build, use endpoints builder dot map fallback. Yeah, there we go. Map fallback. And we can specify what we want to happen if no route is matched. So we can say there's a pattern. What does the pattern do? The route pattern. So you can also say I want under this particular, maybe, I don't know, slash foo, slash, I don't know, slash star, anything under slash foo that is treated with this fallback request delegate. And then the request delegate will be, I can't remember what that delegate looks like. Let's go and have a look. Where's the request delegate? Let's go and have a look at a request delegate. It just takes a HTTP context. So we have our context. In our case, we just want anything to fall back to a particular URL. And we just want to respond with a 404 or something, I guess. You could redirect to the Swagger UI. That would be an interesting way to do this. So I have a bunch of if defs here because this is a project template, but ignore these. If I do this, map fallback context, I could respond with return well, context dot response dot status code equals status codes. There's a nice constant set of constants here in this status codes thing, and I could set that status code to 400. Use expression body. Yeah, let's go on then. Do I need to return anything here? I don't think I do. Map fallback delegate. Interesting. Hold on. Map fallback. There's the request delegate. Is this not a request delegate? And then stick that in there. That works. So why does it complain when I stick that in there? This is saying use an expression body, but that's fine. If I write another line of code, it will stop complaining about that. Not all code paths return a value in lambda expression of type request delegate. Oh, it returns a task. Oh well. Task dot completed. Stick that in there. That should work now. So now if I fire this up, we should get, what's it complaining about? Have I messed this up somehow? Yes, I have. End if directive expected. If, else, else if, end if cause. Oh, I've messed that up. There we go. That's better. Right, let's fire that off. So if I bring up F12, if I just go to blah, blah, blah. Nope, that didn't work. Response code failure. Let's stick a breakpoint in there. There's our response status code. Oh, 400. Oh, it's just not returning the right status code in there over here, but here it says 400 now. So something more useful we can do is redirect to the Swagger UI. Now, one thing I noticed when we create a new project is using Swagger is that the Swagger UI is not enabled by default in production, which is probably a good thing. So if I create a new project here, and we'll create an API project. Next, .NET 6, configure for HTTPS. We'll use controllers. We'll have Open API support. That's what we want. And if I create this, you'll notice in the program, use Swagger and use Swagger UI is only enabled in development, which I thought was pretty odd. What I would have expected is this. So use Swagger generates the Swagger JSON file that is machine readable. The Swagger UI generates the web page. Now in development time, you want both, but in production, you probably don't want the Swagger UI because it can be a security risk. What you can do instead is have a Swagger page, HTML page elsewhere, and have that point to your Swagger JSON file generated by this guy here. So yeah, so if I make that change on my code, I have a custom Swagger UI here, and I have so if I specify that I'm using API versioning, I have a different Swagger UI page. Oh no, that's the Swagger JSON file. Okay, so if I say .use if environment web host environment is development, and I wrote these. I'll put this dot. So I wrote this fluent style function over here. If I go here and go to it, this is in the boxed.asp.NET Core NuGet package, which is available online for you to download, and it's got a load of extension methods available to do this kind of fluent syntax, inline, being able to say, you know, if it's development, do that, and if I had an else statement here, I'd also be able to go x dot, I don't know, do something else, use calls or something. And then this is also available for the service collection. Services dot, let's see if I have use it anywhere. I don't think I do. But if I did, then that would be available there as well. So now my Swagger UI is only available in development time. So in map fallback, I only want to redirect to the Swagger UI in development mode. Dot is development. So if we're in development mode, we want to redirect to it, else we'll just return a 400 bad request, and we'll return a completed task at the end of it. So this one is going to be context.response.redirect to, I can't remember what the location was now. I think it was just a slash for the home page. Is that what it was? Use Swagger UI. Root prefix is string.empty. There we go. So I can actually just, I think I can just stick a string.empty in there. And let's try that out. So we'll fire that up. And if I go to slash blah blah blah, we're in development, we want to redirect back to that page. Will it do it? Oh, we want to redirect to slash index.html. Not that page. Is my hot reload going to work? Nope. Hot reload, not very useful for me so far. There was a lot of fuss made about it, but I've got hot reload on save. So far, most of the changes I make don't seem to produce a hot reload. Try that again. Redirect. And we're back here. Cool. So let's just try that again. This time we'll go into pretend we're in development mode, and we get our 400. Cool. That seems to work nicely. So in my project template, I only need to do this if Swagger is enabled. And if Swagger is not enabled, we want to just return the bad request. I think I need to clean this up a little bit. But yeah, that's the idea. I think that makes sense. So that's use fallback. Another thing I discovered was that there's WebSocket compression now available to us. So this is in the giant blog post announcing .NET 6. And if I scroll down to WebSocket compression, we see that we have the ability to enable compression on our WebSocket connections. Now, this is potentially dangerous. That's why the enum is called dangerous deflate options when you're configuring this. Because I've looked into this in some depth. You could become vulnerable to crime and breach. So what happens is, over a TLS connection, if you're using compression, either gzip, deflate, or Brotli or whatever, then there are patterns which emerge in the bytes that are sent across the wire, and they can work out based on those patterns what the content it was, even though the connection is secured supposedly using TLS. So that's why using compression over HTTPS is a bad idea, and you shouldn't do it unless the content of your connection is just not important enough that you care about securing it. And you should be careful with that, because even like something that's supposedly not important may be important and is worth securing. So it's probably not a good idea to turn this on. But for the places where you want to turn it on, I don't know, maybe you're implementing a simple game or something and you have a WebSocket connection, or maybe you're pinging out notifications over WebSockets over SignalR, or maybe you're using Hot Chocolate GraphQL server and you want to have SignalR, it's not SignalR, WebSockets subscriptions, and you want to ping out some notifications from there. This is a potentially something that's useful there. So I was going to have a quick look at this. How does it work? Enabling compression on the client side is easy. See in the following example. However, bear in mind that the server can negotiate settings such as requesting smaller window. So on the client, you use this code, but we don't care about the client. We're in it for the server. So let's work out whether we can enable it on the server. See, ASP.NET Core, add WebSocket compression support. The WebSocket class does not have support for extensions. It should read the sec WebSocket extensions HTTP header. So that it looks like that's how WebSockets connections know to upgrade to use compression using this HTTP header. Depends on upstream support for WebSockets, blah, blah, blah. Would have been nice to see some documentation. Where are we going with this? So that is the PR that added compression support. And there's a couple of other issues here that might be worth looking at. So let's jump in here. Start with this one. What's this? .NET Core. What's new in .NET 6? So that's just a kind of a catch-all thing. Add WebSocket compression support. So that's the pull request. Main questions are around usability. Do we want to allow setting specific deflate options or just have an option for enabling compression? So it looks like this is the API. So we have new header names, constants, WebSocket manager, accept WebSocket async. This seems quite low level stuff. I don't know how you could. I was expecting like service collection, add WebSocket compression and use WebSocket compression on iApplication Builder. Let's see if we can check the files that were changed. And here, let's see what's happening. Div WebSockets. Where is this? This is an ASP.NET Core. This is in the runtime. I think we should go here and have a look at some of the code. So there's this WebSocket manager that seems to be able to accept WebSocket async with some context, and that's not implemented. We have the context itself. We've got enable compression. Default WebSocket manager. We have extended WebSocket accept context. Handshake helper, we're not interested in. Deflate constants. So it looks like, are these? Not sure what these are. Maybe some HTTP headers or something. WebSocket middleware. So maybe the middleware now has WebSocket options that we can configure. So let's keep an eye out for those. So here's some tests that they've created. Create a Kestrel server. Context. Where is this context coming from? WebSocket. Is WebSocket request. It seems like that's the way to turn it on, is in your HTTP context. Call this function and call this thing. I was expecting WebSocket options to be able to set it on there. So not as straightforward as I first thought, actually. And let's have a look on the client side. On the client side, we've got a request. Set generic WebSocket request. We're adding this header with this value. That's the type of compression to use, I guess. And we send the request, and the response tells it we're going to switch protocols, and we're going to use this deflate protocol instead. That's interesting. So a lot harder to set than I thought. WebSocket options. I was expecting to be able to go into WebSocket options and set some option. I suspect that does not, unless there was a subsequent PR. We can check that. Class WebSocket options. We only have keep alive, receive buffer size, and allowed origins. So no support for compression there. So yeah, that's a bit involved having to do that. So yeah, that's something I'd look into, whether they were going to make that easier to use. Your client needs to support compression for that to be useful though. If it's a JavaScript client, does JavaScript support JavaScript WebSocket compression? Deflate in WebSockets. So I suspect browsers will not implement this per message deflate in WebSocket connections. If the client browser supports it, the server knows. So I don't know, can I go to caniuse.com and type that? No, deflate. WebSockets, WebSocket API, WebSocket URL, send, close, on open, on close, on error, protocol, on message. Yeah, so it's not clear whether this thing can be used. Maybe MDN can tell us. The Mozilla Developer Network. Nope. Browser support. What browsers support this? It's unclear to me. Oh. This is a great blog post. WebSocket per message compression in ASP.NET Core. I forget this gentleman's name. I always read his blog posts. He's really good. Thomas. Really good blog posts. This is obsolete since ASP.NET Core 6. There's a built-in support for WebSockets compression. You can read more about it here. Okay, he's written a whole blog post on the subject. And it turns out, yeah, this is the function we need, like we saw. It would look like below. So this is how you turn it on. Why such a scary property name? He's talking about crime and breach. We already discussed that. Per message compression. Yeah. Okay, so this is probably not something I would use. So if where I would use this is probably on a Hot Chocolate GraphQL server. So I happen to have one over here. So if I start this up, it's got subscriptions in it, and it would be a good idea if Hot Chocolate added an option to turn that on for us. Another interesting new piece of functionality, which not a lot of people have talked about or covered, is this one over here, Configure Host Options API. So this lets you set the shutdown timeout. And I think that's the only option in there at the moment. So I was going to have a look at that. So we have a host builder here, configure host options. I think that's going to be in program.cs. Shall we just use our simple application here to have a look? So we should just be able to do builder.host configure host options. There we go. O dot. Oh, there's a couple of other things in here. Shutdown timeout, properties, sharing state between components, hosting environment, configuration, backgrounds, service, exception behavior. The behavior to follow when any of its background service instances throw an unhandled exception. That's interesting. Let's jump into there. You can either stop the host or ignore the exception. And the default is what exactly? Defaults to stop host. Okay. So there's two options in there. So this is if you have a background service, which is something that can run in the background. It can call execute async once on application start and what dispose on once the application is stopped. And then this execute is you're supposed to have like something like a while true in it, and that executes on and on. And shutdown timeout is super useful for when you have background services that are doing something and they take a while to run, and you don't want them to you don't want the application to just die halfway through them doing some job. So you can say, give it a shutdown timeout of, I don't know, 10 minutes is quite a long time, but probably 1 minute would be a reasonable time. And host options. I wonder if there's a better way to do this. So I wonder if I can just, instead of doing this, do builder dot configuration dot builder dot services dot configure host options, and this goes to builder dot configuration dot get required section host. I'll call it host. Oops. So now I should be able to set these settings in my app settings.json file, which I would argue is a better way to do it. Shutdown timeout. And this is going to be 00 for hours, minutes, seconds. So we want 1 minute. And if I then go and once we have built the app, go app dot services dot get required service I options host options host options equals that dot value, and we'll just console.writeline this out. We'll console writeline that, and the next line is the shutdown timeout, and we'll see what that looks like if I fire that up in Chrome. Section host not found in configuration. Did I not? Oh, I just added it into the root. That's since I did a get required section. Fire that off. Failed to convert configuration value at background service exception behavior to type. Oh, I forgot to add like ignore or something in here. I think the default was stop host. We'll just go with that, stop host. What would be the best answer here? To stop the application or ignore the exception? It's probably a good idea to ignore. It might be a good idea to ignore it. Well, it depends on how you're hosting it. If it's a Kubernetes cluster, if you stop the host, a new one will start and you'll get that behavior continuously, which may be okay. If you're hosting it otherwise, if you just have one hard-coded instance somewhere, you might want to ignore the error. So here we go, we've got stop host and 1 minute. If I switch this over to get section instead of get required section, we can even just comment that out. And now I think it will just pick up the defaults that are built into ASP.NET Core. And let's try that. And stop host, and 5 seconds is the default, which seems like a very small amount of time actually. That default seems a bit too stingy to me. I'd probably increase this timeout as a matter of course in your applications. So I'd always include this and set it to something like, I don't know, 1 minute is a lot, but 30 seconds or something. Well, so ASP.NET Core has a bunch of Kestrel settings in it that are worth looking at. And if we go over here, we can have a look at some of those settings. If it's going to let me open this link. Configure endpoint options. No, that's not a useful link. Is it the other one? Yeah, it's definitely worth coming in here and making sure you really understand this. So the request headers timeout. So it takes 30 seconds for a request to time out. Defaults to 30 seconds. Now, if during that request, the application gets told it needs to shut down, then the application is going to take 5 seconds to shut down, and that request is just going to get responded to with nothing really. It's just going to error. So I think the default of 5 seconds is not a very good default, and you should change that really. So 30 seconds is the same as that request, but ideally it should be higher than that because it will take some time for that request to process and for some of those bytes to transfer up and down as well. So maybe a minute was not a bad idea actually. Get the maximum amount of time a server will spend receiving request headers. So that's just the request headers. Do we have other timeouts here? Timeout. No, we don't. Oh, keep alive timeout. Defaults to 130 seconds. Interesting. Okay. So 130 seconds is 2 minutes, 10 seconds. That's a really long time. And I reckon this should probably be more than that. 2 minutes, 30 seconds maybe. Keep alive. If the keep alive timeout, if a connection can last for 130 seconds, and I don't even know if that includes this 30 seconds here. It may or may not. If it does, then this should be something like 3 minutes, potentially, to avoid having requests being responded to with an error when an API shuts down. So yeah, you probably want to change this. That should not, 5 seconds is not enough. You should change that. That would be my advice. And yeah, we've come close to the end of our hour. So those are some settings that are worth looking into. I'd probably configure it this way as opposed to using this, as opposed to hard coding it. This way you get nice configurability all in one place. And then I actually do the same with my Kestrel options, and then I can set all these limits that occur that I just showed you over here from the Kestrel server limits class. These can all be set in the config here. So then you'd end up with potentially a section here saying host shutdown timeout. Let's call it a nice around 3 minutes. Yeah, I think these two settings make sense living next to each other. And then you just need to configure that inside your application somewhere. So in my case, host filtering options, I'm just going to add a line here that says host options, and so I have a type here that I can just use and bind my configuration to host options host. That just gets the name host, so I don't have hard coded string here. That's a get required section, and now that's all hooked up and we've got host options configured for our application. And if we wanted to, we could query this. We could inject our application options into our classes using dependency injection and pull out the host options. So that's all good. So we've taken a look at some lesser known features. Needs more Kata is Jonathan's comment there. Yeah, I haven't really looked at Kata. Could I make the text larger? Certainly. I'm a bit late for that. I'm so sorry. If you're on a mobile phone, I will certainly take that feedback on board and do that next time. Yeah, I've totally messed up with the comments, and I should probably spend some more time looking at them. I do set them up, so I do have the ability to do this on the stream and this. So yeah, next time I will make the comments, the text larger, and yeah, I will have a look at Kata as well. I'm not sure. So back in the day when Nancy was a thing, Nancy was really popular, and it was decidedly better than what ASP.NET was at the time. ASP.NET MVC all the way up to 5. But with ASP.NET Core, do we still need Kata? I don't know. It's an open question for me. I need to spend more time on it. and looking into it. So yeah, thanks for the questions, and I will catch you up later on Friday stream. At that point, I'm not sure what we'll be discussing. We'll probably look into Azure Container Apps maybe, and deploy an application using Pulumi to write some infrastructure code instead of using what is it, Azure Bicep or Azure, the JSON templates, ARM templates, because I think those are not as good as Pulumi. So we'll have a look at that next on Friday and see how that goes. Azure Container Apps is pretty interesting. It's built on top of Kubernetes, and you can quite simply deploy something, any container. There's lots of different ways to deploy containers at the moment, and it's a bit confusing about when to use which. So maybe we'll discuss some of that as well. So catch you on Friday stream. If you want to subscribe and like, that will help the channel out. And you can ask me any questions on Twitter at Rehan Said UK, and you can also contact me, email me or anything. The link is in my blog at rehansaid.com. Catch you later. Bye.